my eyes are sensitive to light, and I just didn't realize how sensitive to light they were.
All right, so you're a new man now. And we can't see what you're
am.
up to behind those things. I can't see into your soul. I actually don't like them. I can't tell what's going on. You're too mysterious. We're not playing poker here. We're having a discussion.
You know what? Sunglasses and poker is so lame. Isn't that a bitch move to wear sunglasses and poker?
Yeah. Don't you want to signal them in the wrong direction as well? Like a good actor would never do that. Someone who's really good at poker wouldn't wear them.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. You know what I want to talk about?
What do you want to talk about?
I want to bring this up just right off the hop. We'll just hop right into this while I'm cleaning my glasses here. Oh, did you? Well, we could talk about your thing first or my thing first. It doesn't matter.
All right. I think mine's more important. So
go.
So I'm going to go. So there's this fascination with obese black women in American politics, twerking specifically, and there's this viral video of a ancient flute being taken out of the Smithsonian, and then this overweight black woman plays two notes on it and shakes her booty in front of the wife of President Biden, and it's this great celebratory thing. And the woman is wearing this bathing suit, and it's very revealing of every extra curve that she has. I don't understand. People are saying that, the right wing or dissident right wing thought is saying that the embarrassment is intentional. It's to embarrass the symbols of America. But
no, that's a bad analysis. That's wrong. That's not what it is. It's
I like that you've got the answers here. Go on now.
I saw that was Lizzo. So a little bit of background on Lizzo is Lizzo's actually, I'm going to get slaughtered for this. She's actually a very, very talented musician. She's very, very good. Her music is obviously, I want to move my light here so I can we need to have the correct effect. Otherwise, we're just not going to be able to have
Benjamin predicted this, by the way.
Everyone predicts this.
He says the first 45 minutes you're always setting your stuff up.
I set this up before, but it just didn't give me the look I wanted, and now I'm upset. I'm annoyed.
No.
Oh, right. Well, we'll just have to cope with bad lighting for the rest of this time. We're suffering through it like men. So she's actually quite talented. And there's a way in which you could be sympathetic to her because she went for years, and I mean years, struggling through all kinds of poverty before she hit it big. And her music, in terms of like chord progressions, note selection, production quality, is consistently the melodic stuff that she does. The kind of drony stuff isn't, but the melodic stuff, her use of keys and things like this, is actually very good. When she gets up and she goes to play the flute, because I saw that video, she says, "Okay, guys, it's like I'm playing through a wine glass. You got to be careful here." She's actually a very good flute player as well. Okay. So here's the point, is that she could have probably played some very beautiful classical music with that flute if she had wanted to. The point of just playing something and shaking her rear end was the point. That is itself the point. And what I mean
what's
by
the
that
symbolic meaning of that?
That's right.
There is no symbolic meaning. That's just
no. It is merely her saying, what we're gonna do with this flute, because she plays it and she tells them like the background of this historic instrument, and then says, "Y'all, I just twerked while playing James Madison's flute," and it's like. Because to them,
I missed that this was James Madison's flute. I thought that this was just
It was James Madison's flute from 1813.
And why did they give that to her to start with?
Well, because she is one of the more famous She might be, I mean, along with, you know, somebody like Post Malone or Nicki Minaj or Cardi B or Billie Eilish or Beyonce, like among the most famous of this generation's American pop stars.
Yeah.
She would be right up there.
But to give a pop star a flute, square one, you're defiling something before sacred, right? Isn't it? It's
kind of
bursting the bubble on something that's.
So Lizzo's actually a really good flute player. Like, she's actually talented at that. The point is not that. The point is not to play badly. That misses the analysis. The analysis is, by all rights, she has fought her way to the top and earned the ability to say, look, I want to be one of those people who gets to play this historic instrument. It would be no different than if, say, John Mayer or Buddy Guy wanted to play Jimi Hendrix's guitar from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They would allow that
while
because
twerking
of who he is.
In a bathing suit.
There's the point. The point is, now that she's earned her way to do that, what she wants to do is take that historic instrument and discursively connect that to the culture out of which she comes and which she wants to propagate and which she's pushing. What she's doing is saying, this thing is a historic symbol of this thing is symbolically, discursively, and historically connected to the founding fathers. I'm going to play it whilst I performatively engage in the most overt expression of my current culture that I want to propagate and push. Do you think
she thinks of it like that? I don't know who this Lizzo character is.
Oh, I don't think
it strikes me as she just, perhaps that flute and that stage, if she's there with the president of the United States, holds some kind of sacred value that she just doesn't feel, and so she therefore goes ahead. And is she always provocative like this, or is she provocative?
This is just her. This is just her saying that's the historic instrument, and I, Lizzo, am going to attach my own meaning to that historic instrument. I'm going to do my cultural thing with this historical cultural object.
Okay, so
that's the point.
There's her culture, but also the symbol of her in our culture as an American culture, right? So there's just a through line between Naima Lowe, who is the same kind of iconic figure.
Yes.
And Naima Lowe, who is the Evergreen professor, she explicitly says that she has a symbolic meaning, that she is, this woman with this nappy hair in the woods that's rude and bitchy that the white folk don't know how to deal with.
And she says that herself.
Naima Lowe in her.
She says she's got symbolic meaning.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't think...
So she knows what's going on.
Conscious of what's going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had somebody tell me when I was in university that walking down the hallway of the university was a political act because they, as a queer person, in the act of walking down the university are engaging performatively in the doing of a thing which, in their view, they would not be allowed to do under an oppressive heteropatriarchal system. So the very act of walking through the halls of knowledge and therefore power of the university as a queer woman or queer person is a political act of resistance.
Well, it just strikes me as more of this over analytical stuff. They're compelled to do something and then make sense of it after the fact. We make too much sense of it, but it is funny because it does work perfectly from a symbolic point of view.
Right.
I think these people are just doing whatever comes naturally to them, and then after the fact, we pore over it and talk about it, and then look. The hermeneutic tribes all interpret it in their own way. A lot of this stuff is just people going about their business, and then when it has symbolic meaning, this kind of mythological meaning, it'll go viral.
Yeah, I think
the act underneath it is less considered. Just people going about their business. I don't know. In this case, she could just be.
No, I think I think that's right. That's why I said, like, I think she's just I'm doing the historical instrument, and now I'm performing my cultural thing with the historical thing. So what's my culture? My culture is wearing this leotard type thing and spandex and twerking. That's my culture. So I'm going to perform.
It sounds horrible. I'm really glad I'm not. I'm
going to perform I'm performing my cultural acts and the things that are meaningful to my people using this other thing, which has the symbolic meaning of the founding fathers. I'm just bringing those two things together. That's, to her, it goes no deeper than that. It's like she's sitting there. It isn't as though she's sitting there thinking, how can I attack the symbols of the American founding?
Okay,
she's not doing that.
Well, she's not doing that, but why is the Biden administration or progressives at large, they worship and they fawn and they cheer and they scream when an act like this happens? Because it means something to that white progressive set. It's like, we're performing a liberatory principle. I don't think that they are... Well, maybe they are intentionally denigrating or celebrating the denigration of the founding symbols. There's probably that too, but there's this expression of ambition or of power that comes with the releasing of these symbols' status or the merging of their status with another form.
Yeah,
that's it. Well, Mike, do you want to take a run at it first, or do you want me to take a run at it?
No, because I was just thinking, I'm not doing this centrist both sidism thing, but because I roll my eyes at that these days. But I was also thinking about Donald Trump bringing McDonald's into the White House and just little bits and pieces like that, and how the other side talked about that as denigrating something sacred. Like in January 6th, there was a lot of, the analysis on how, taking that podium was or moving into that central room was entering something before sacred, and they defiled it and all that sort of thing. And so it is funny because it's like we're all reacting to, they do work perfectly symbolically, and then we react to those symbols. But underneath it, it's just people kind of reacting and going about their business a lot of the time.
Can I just add one little analysis since you brought up January 6th? There's something perfectly symbolic about the dissident right wing, that they stay in the queue lines, they stay in the cordons when they're doing the job of defiling the Capitol. When they flooded the Capitol, they stayed within the...
They still right.
They still stay within the lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean... There were a couple of people who clearly were not doing that, but for the most part, the people who are going in there, it's kind of like, how can I put it?
They're respecting the symbol that they're desecrating in a way.
When I watched January 6th happen, on the day that happened, and I stand by this, I said, send in the army. Like, clear out the Capitol, man. Like, you don't do that. Like, no. Like, get the hell out of here. But I believe that, and I stand by that. However, I do think there is this symbolic analysis. Like when the people walked in and they finally got into the Capitol, they didn't immediately start engaging in a systematic hunt for people. They got in and then they milled around in the I don't know what you call it, the foyer or the central lounge, or like that open kind of circular area just outside. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That central area. They milled about in there waiting for the level to end. It's like they just finished a raid in Warcraft and we're now waiting for the fairy to bring them their extra points or whatever it is. Warcraft. It's like Mario lowers the flag and they're waiting for their points. Where's the bonus level? We got to return to the map screen.
What now?
Yeah. It's like, now what? They didn't know. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have sent in the army, because we clearly should have, because we're clearing out the Capitol building. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I'm still mad about that, because we used to be able to say that we don't do stuff like that. Now we can't. And pointing back at Wisconsin in 2011 doesn't save us. But the symbolic thing is, I think, the more important thing that what Benjamin hit on. And actually, I think, Ben, you touched on another thing you said, or Mike, you said that the hermeneutic tribes just endlessly process this.
Yeah.
Right? And Benjamin, you said that like it's the melding of symbols. What I think is happening is that to the political left, giving Lizzo access to James Madison's flute is a way of saying, fat, black, progressive, hard left, LGBTQ, trans affirming, expressive individualist symbol of our culture can get as much free access to the founding symbols as a cisgendered heterosexual white man. That's how they're going to view that.
Yeah.
I view it as, if my 8-year-old wants to see someone playing like the coolest flute that no one's played in 200 years, I'd like to be able him to show that without someone doing a sexual act or a sexualized act. That would be nice. I mean, I would, like if suppose they found one of, I don't know, let's say Jimi Hendrix, but you could pick anyone, Robert Johnson, Jimmy Page, Kurt Cobain's guitars, and they gave it to somebody who played it and then, pretended it was a phallus and was being sexual with the phallus. Someone's going to clip that out and use that against me. But if somebody did that, I would not want my son to watch that either. I'd kind of like it if...
But also the fans would be horrified. There'd be a subset of people...
Rock and roll is already explicitly sexual. I mean, you have Mick Jagger like riding a giant phallus already. So I mean, the symbols of rock and roll is already
the subset of humans that would be horrified by that is fairly small, I guess.
But I don't know. But I wouldn't want. There's a lot of rock and roll music I won't let my son listen to because he's 8. But when someone comes out and plays an instrument like that, I think they would just play the instrument to show people how beautiful it sounds. I've seen a lot of guys play those old guitars, like the serial number 2 of the Les Paul, like the second one ever made, or like a 1951. I mean, I think it'd be a broadcaster at that point, not even a Telecaster. Like the early Telecasters, they treat those instruments. And I mean, you can even see Lizzo doing this when she's holding the instrument up. Like she has a certain amount of respect for that instrument, like because she knows what that is. She honestly is aware of that, but she's just melding the culture to her that comes naturally. So for her, twerking is as natural a cultural act for her as the handshake is for you or me.
Yeah.
And so in doing that, it's melding those things, and that's what progressives want. Yeah, we want to bring twerking together with the founding fathers. And we want to symbolically connect those two things together.
But it's about not caring as well. Like she doesn't care. She doesn't care. So she does whatever. It's like a child that is on a stage at some kind of ceremony and then plays up to his friends. Just kind of bursts the bubble on that thing and plays up on it. But I find the interesting part is the analysis of the analysis, not the analysis itself. I'm becoming less and less interested in events.
Yeah, well, wait. So are you diving into like a postmodern? Like you're looking at the matrix of the matrix? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like, maybe that's where it's interesting for me, because the underlying stories of these things are often so chewed up in the analysis that they're not even real anymore. So we're in a space where we're talking about our own morality, and I mean that's where the juice of it is. Because if anyone who's been in the middle of a news event and a kind of media circus arised around that news event, you'll see that the news event gets further and further away from the analysis. And so people analyze, and what are you left with at that point? You're left with a kind of it's a moral interpretation. Yeah. It's a moral interpretation. I think that these are like churches. These hermeneutic tribes use news as a way to morally interpret. And then at the end, you've got some moral interpretation. If you actually go to the raw material, the base of where these stories come from, it's so far away from it, it may as well be an abstract story in and of itself. It may well be a biblical story, because they're putting their moral interpretation between the facts that live underneath it. And as soon as there's a certain distance away from those facts, what you have is a kind of anthropological artifact at that point. You're looking at the the collective, because whatever rises to the top has affected people in some sense. Do you know what I mean? Because all these different analyses happen, and maybe 1 million of them fall on the ground, and 1 or 2 of them survive. And so whatever survived at the end point is it's showing you something about the humans that created it more than the facts underneath. And so it's like these are like a news interpretation is like getting the good news. It's like going every week and then you're hearing your moral interpretations of the world.
Oh, yeah,
it's no longer the word of God. It's Spinoza's God. It's data. And so our interpretations of the data are the good news. And you go there to repeat them. The only reason you're going to the news is to find a person who's interpreted the world the way you want to see it, or that makes you feel good, and then you get a reinforcement of that worldview. You get a reinforcement.
Right. When you talked about the hermeneutic tribes, this is exactly, that's why I about maybe 6 minutes ago, I focused on that and I said, that's the point. I think talking about the event of Lizzo playing the flute really kind of misses the point. The reason that's an event is it because it creates a space for hermeneutical interpretation of the event. It creates a space. They've got a hermeneutic they want to do because it contains a certain set of a moral ethic to it.
Yeah.
But the moral ethic doesn't self-exist. It needs to be grasped onto something, right?
Yes.
And so because it needs to be grafted onto something, and they need events that have the events that can be properly and appropriately and easily and hermeneutically and interpretively connected to the dialectical concepts that are evolved or that are involved in their interpretive moral framework.
Yes.
So.
And whoever's good at that becomes famous. Do you know what I mean? It's like our influences are the people who understand.
I don't even think fame.
The moral paradigm.
Yes. So this is a 1965 Gibson Firebird.
Yeah.
Okay. I can pick this up and play it. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything that I can do that, right?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't matter because I'm just me. I'm just some regular old guy who's just like,
who just happens to be awesome at playing the axe.
I wish I was
There's a little
really
bit
amazing.
of meaning there. Little bit of meaning in there, but go on. No. Wait, where are you taking this?
Oh, well, what I'm saying is that guitar isn't in any way connected to any significant concepts, events, or
current thing.
Or it's not symbolically connected to anything that can be used in the service of interpreting and bringing about that sort of hermeneutical ethic that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't have any symbolic value in terms of representing any particular ethics, morals, views, points of views, ideas, concept. Yeah. But Lizzo, we can hold up Lizzo and say, okay, fat, black, on their terms. That's not the words I would use because I wouldn't focus on that. They, in terms of the healthy at any size activists, intentionally, like what's her name? I can't remember her name. She calls herself the fat sex therapist on Instagram. She would use the term fat intentionally, as in fat studies.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. That, say, fat, black, female,
probably queer,
progressive. Yeah. They would put all of those things to her. Those are all the dialectical concepts involved. And then twerking is connected to culture and all sexual
liberation, and then
all of those
the cultural aspect of it. Yeah.
You can bring all those dialectical concepts into that analysis. Then you have James Madison's flute and what concepts? The founding.
Slavery.
Well, they can connect it to patriarchy, slavery, liberalism, the Constitution, law. All of that get over here. And so now when this person here plays this guy's flute, we can now have a situation where we can dialectically synthesize and just begin processing it's like we churn the milk and we churn that into cream. Okay,
and the traction that something like this gets is
now
actually,
you just turn it into butter. This is gonna get clipped out. But we're just turning everything. So you're churning that discourse. You're taking the milk of the discourse and you're churning it into butter.
But so
delicious, creamy butter.
When you
morally
really
satisfying,
and when you really distill the Hermetic tribe down to a dialectic or a duality, you have the people who are offended by that, which would be loosely right wing, and then the people who celebrate that, who would be loosely left wing, who
and
are always fighting.
It's so symbolically dense for those two tribes that this is a guess because I haven't been looking at this stuff, but. Do you think that's got more coverage, more interpretations and spread than Nord Stream exploding?
Yeah, there's a huge gas.
Think about how much actual
in the Baltic Sea right now
that could be the precipitating event for World War III, or close to, and the amount of meaning that is like the history books might hold on to that event, yet. Lizzo twerking with a flute is getting more traction because it's got more symbolic.
I found the platonic form of what we're talking about.
What have you got?
Okay, so Lizzo playing the flute. History is freaking cool. Lizzo. That's Lizzo's comment.
That's what she said.
Of course, it's the nation's capital, so the Secret Service and the Capitol Police joined her on stage. Why? Because she's the first ever to play James Madison's 1813 crystal flute, courtesy of the Library of Congress. Matt Walsh quote tweets that with simply desecrating American history just for the sake of it. Liberty Bell, who I don't know was who on Twitter, somebody, did she have?
Her.
Millennial Mama means puns, dad jokes, ADHD, but there's, she's a libertarian.
Oh.
Her pinned tweet is, my beliefs are pretty simple. The government should. Nope. So she's a libertarian. She says, politics and flashy headlines aside, please note that Lizzo is a classically trained flautist and an extremely gifted musician. I can assure you that the level of care she took with that piece of history is appropriate and an incredible honor for her. Matt Walsh responds, Lizzo was a morbidly obese weirdo in a thong twerking around on stage while playing with a priceless piece of American history. That's the level of care we're talking about here. Also, I don't give a flying shit if it's an honor for her. That's not the point at all. And so right there, you can see it. Those are the three interpretive tribes right there processing the event, right?
Yeah.
You can see it. You can just see it. That's the platonic form of the thing that's occurring.
And how many people have a crack at their take? It's kind of what Twitter is. It's just millions of takes per event, and then the cream of the crop right at the top. And so it's We said something about fame earlier, and you were saying it's not fame. I didn't quite understand where you were going with that.
I don't think it's just fame. I think it's actual agency. Once you get enough traction, once you prove your bones and you have a follower, you actually have freedom. That's when your profile or your internet existence actually gains agency.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is agency. Status. Because there is your you're speaking to an audience who want to hear you, so you may naturally have that perspective in your bones. They're kind of Moses. so Moses has, what's the story of Moses? You know this better than me. He was like a judge, or people came to him to resolve grievances, right? So you're resolving a grievance. Someone's wrong, someone's right. There's an ethic in being a judge for those grievances. He does this again and 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 again. All of a sudden, an ethic goes into his bones. Then he goes to the top of the mountain and then writes down the ethic, the rules. He's the first person to get it down, right? And he shows everyone, you're Moses, and everyone goes, holy shit, that's what we've been, that's what we've been intuiting towards. That is good. That man gets it. That man understands our moral framework here. And then Moses is the king.
Prophet.
Prophet. But I mean, king is in everyone loves him, right? Like he is a prophet. And so in some sense, if you're embodying the kind of moral hermeneutic of a certain tribe, you're becoming their prophet.
I just want to read this. And again, the Platonic form of what you're just saying. Tiffany C. Lee. So blue check, tech Yale scholar, fellow at Yale, law prof, UNH Law. Did you recently follow this account because you saw a viral post about music, history, race, and culture? So there's your interpretive tribe. She says, Lizzo, a black female superstar collaborating with Carla Hayden, the first African-American and first woman librarian of Congress, to use a flute from James Madison, the founding father who originated the 3/5 Compromise and also the Library of Congress itself. The symbolism.
Yeah.
Right?
It's right there.
It's just we're just embodying the symbolism. Yeah. It's so here's what I think is going on.
But before you go on, I just don't want to lose this point that Benjamin had, which was freedom at the top. Once you get that prophet status, do you see freedom there? I see it for, I think a true prophet might have freedom because they're speaking from their bones, right? And people will follow them. But I don't
capture.
I think a lot of people are playing to win. There are kinds of people that play to win, and then they look at, it's not in their bones. The thing's not in their bones. They learn the patterns. They learn the patterns of the hermeneutic tribe and then feed the tribe content. And so they're never free on the top.
Yeah.
There's different people who get to the top, and there's the players, but there's also room for artists. And I think that, Mike, part of your story, I don't want to bring too much personal stuff in it. It just seems like over the past few years, you're really wrestling as an artist. You've learned the books, you've learned the grievance studies, you've seen it, you've analyzed it from all these different directions, but you're not satisfied with just doing that. You want to do something with that rather than just memorize the patterns and stuff. So I think that there's freedom once the artist who gains enough of a fan base to not succumb to fanarchy but still have relevance. So there's like this.
How many of those people are there though?
How many will be remembered? I mean, that's the Darwinian.
That's
the Darwinian question. Like, you have to be more than just a prophet.
The Darwinian process works over time. The collective humanity, like future humanity versus the current. It's an interesting angle there.
How far Matt Walsh will be remembered. I mean, he's really big right now, and he's making the right moves right now, and he's speaking to his tribe, and he has a very solid message with it's very easy. Christo-fascist might be ironic. It might not be ironic, right? That's what he calls himself. But how much influence will he have over time? How much is he interpreting? How much is he putting into his interpretations that's actually changing the core narrative or changing the dynamics of the hermeneutic? That would be where art and freedom would be, is to be able to formulate something that would then change the way that these viral things are processed and digested, right?
Nietzsche talked about this in terms of gravity as well. It's like becoming a dancing star. I always saw that as gravity, because the people drag you back into their way of being, and if you can kind of reach escape velocity, you're
shedding light, but
that's it. But you become the gravitational force. You become a star. You become a star yourself, and people will follow a prophet that can reach
the question
escape velocity.
The question is, did you get to the top because people followed you, or did you get to the top because you can go in the direction everyone's always going in the fastest? Why are you at the front of the line? Is it because everyone's running a direction and you're the fastest at running that direction? Or is it...
Yeah, it's interesting.
Is it because you're going a direction and people are following behind you?
Yeah.
I would say that Jordan Peterson is at the front of the line because Jordan Peterson started going in a direction.
Yeah.
And people followed him. And I've heard a lot of people rag on his recent content because he does message to the Christian churches and message to the Muslims and some of this stuff. And that's not really what he got famous for. But if you watch his interview with Jonathan Peugeot and Douglas Murray, and his interview with Peter Kreeft, man, that guy is still on his game. And when his
Really?
Exodus when his Exodus lectures drop in November, I think you're going to see a lot of that old Jordan Peterson that lecturing Jordan Peterson that people liked is going to be back. And so I've said for a long time that Jordan Peterson shifted the tectonic plates of Western civilization. People are just now starting to realize it. And back at the time, a person who was maybe at a time a prophet on the left, ContraPoints, said of Jordan Peterson, talked about how well some of his self-help is okay, his self-help stuff is fine, but ContraPoints took issue with Jordan Peterson because ContraPoints said Jordan Peterson is presenting a sort of improvement of self as a panacea and replacement for progressive political action. And that was the critique. And it's like, in a way, kind of what Jordan Peterson did is say, the problem is not that we need to entirely restructure and transform society. You can actually be successful if you restructure and transform yourself. The problem is not the structure of reality or the structure of society. It's that reality, and you have to be a kind of person. That is in the American context, that's a right-wing message. And that's why they didn't like him. Okay? So I agree with you, actually.
Also, it's very zeitgeisty, right? It's going straight to the individual, because that point of the individual is where all the back and forth happens. And how to define that individual, and he had a very interesting angle on that, bringing responsibility being core to that, and that actually being the thing that brings joy to the individual, not liberation.
What did he say? What did he say that that responsibility brings is
power,
meaning.
Yeah.
And so that brings us back to our connective tissue here, which is the meaning, the hermeneutic, the interpretation, what's meaningful, right?
Yeah.
And so the problem, all of this comes from a crisis of meaning.
Yeah.
That's where this shows up.
Well,
now,
you also say you're saying Peterson shifted the tectonic plates of Western civilization. I don't know if that was the exact quote, but something to that effect.
Yeah.
I think if we rewind a while, I think Foucault's the one that's going to be remembered. Foucault did something big. He was a self-described disciple of Friedrich Nietzsche, and he turned it into something. He really was. And I mean, we're haunted by his ghost. We're haunted by the ghosts of his pathologies. It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
That's the hauntology of Foucault. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Before we go on, Mike and Wokal, could we just very briefly just gloss his contribution, Foucault's contribution? And Mike, I want to hear your perspective on that, and Wokal, if you have a counterpoint to that.
Wokal, you take this away because you're probably more articulate at this kind of thing. You take it, and then I'll come in after you.
What Foucault did. How do we do this in the soundbite? So
because that's the hard part is there's so much. There's so much. Sexuality's a big one, and
so here's what we'll do. The move for Foucault is to say, in the pre-Foucault, everyone was focused on the material circumstances, right? The physical reality. Foucault, and you could actually trace it back further, but there was a linguistic turn, a move toward the study of language, and within that, the study of culture, and how actually it's culture and language, which is how we choose to distribute the resources and the material. So in some sense, the material reality is structured and is a product of, or at least the material reality of human beings, the social material reality of human beings, you might think of it that way. Who gets which resources and where do they get to live and how and what is their existence like is determined in some sense. It's negotiated through language, culture.
Yeah,
But
the ethic, you can find the ethic in the language. You find he was uncovering
Master slave.
He was uncovering where
yes.
the ethic is in the knowledge, it's in the language, and so we can uncover all this stuff to find the nub underneath it, which is something like the Bible, Christianity. That's the whiff of Christianity that's kind of that's left over after the fact, that's in our language and norms. And we can pry that open and then see the power that lives underneath it, and then re-engineer that to equity or to whatever you want. I don't think he wasn't really.
Foucault was amoral, but here's the point. So
amoral.
So Foucault's going to take
amoral.
What's his name? Noam Chomsky called him the most amoral man he'd ever met.
Right.
So what Foucault's going to do is say he's going to focus on power, the will to power coming from Nietzsche specifically, and he's going to say the question for Foucault that's running through his work is, who died made you king? You could think of it that way. He wants to know power. So what's power for Foucault? The ability to do things, the ability to accomplish work, to exercise influence. So you could broadly think of power for Foucault as a combination of agency and influence. Something like that. That's the ballpark. Again, 10,000 books have been written on what exactly Foucault means by power, because he's not always pinned down clearly on what he means. But
who gets Foucault to do what? Who
gets to do
what? Who defers to who?
Yes, and what Foucault is going to say is the discourses, right, which is the society-wide conversation, including all of the symbols, ideas, thoughts, words, sentences, texts, books, songs, paragraphs, poems,
imagery. It's
everything with
pronouns.
Meaning is
pronouns
is in the discourse, and what makes things relevant, meaningful, powerful within the discourse. Well, I don't know, claims to knowledge and claims to truth are a big part of that. And so what Foucault is going to say is knowledge is used to justify
biopower,
actions, power, control, influence. So and Foucault is going to say that knowledge is a product of social processes. Knowledge is a purely social object, which is created by a series of processes for determining what counts as true according to a given society. So truth, and that's adjacent to knowledge in Foucault's thing. Truth, and he has an interesting way of defining it. I've got to pull this up because I don't want to mess this up.
Let me insert then, if I can catch the thought. So back to the different hermeneutic tribes. I'm wondering, like, the right wing offended by Lizzo, the left wing celebrating Lizzo, and then a bunch of people in between. If we think of the culture war as a culture war, but I don't think it's a war in a traditional sense. I guess we're fighting over who gets to interpret what, but we know that the institutions are on one side. Consistently, the ratchet is going in one direction. So it seems like the right-wing thought, broadly speaking, or dissident thought at all to the elite narrative is never going to catch up. It's always going to have to eventually update itself to be in line, if 10 years ago, to the progressive ratchet.
Well,
wait.
Go.
This is the Foucault quote's going to answer this. Okay. So Foucault says truth is to be understood as a system of ordered procedures for the regulation, distribution, circulation, and operation of statements. Truth is linked in a circular relation with systems of power which produce and sustain it, and to effects of power which induces it and which extend it. That's exactly.
I've just got this image of him sending flying monkeys out to our academic output, and it's like, go get the epistemology, get it, and there's all these like flying monkeys that
send in the relativist account. And so that is in Foucault's view, truth is a social object. it's almost like a functionalist object, which is to say, truth is not. We might define truth as correspondence to reality, but the statements which actually function as true, we give statements because we think they correspond to reality. But he goes, no. What's actually happening is that there's a system which produces things which are considered true, and then we treat those things as if they actually describe the reality, and then we circulate and distribute them according to the systems of in a circular relation with systems of power which produce and sustain it. So what he's saying is, once truth is entirely the product of a system of ordered procedures. So we have things which produce them. In this case, it's the peer-reviewed system which gives the stamp of truth on particular statements. And then those statements are circulated through the media and circulated through academia. And
in his time, especially, that was a certain social class that was producing that.
And truth is then linked to the systems of power, and the systems of power then feed back in to those institutions, which then use that as circular justification or grant themselves the legitimacy to create truth statements. Yeah. That's Foucault's view. So
truth TM. So he's right. It's like
that's how he's analyzing truth.
It's the prescription. The description's great. The prescription is where everything goes crazy. It's like, what do you do with that? So he laid out the blueprint for power, and what you have from his point. He's the most cited academic in the history of man.
Yes. Yeah.
And so what you have from that point is an obsession with, it's like the goblins after the ring, Lord of the Rings, also the ring of power. So you've got this growth on the side of the university, which is the power school. You've got on the other side, you've got the divinity school, you've got the power school, and they're uprooting every, I guess, assertion that they're changing how we look at epistemology. Correct. They are rewiring everything.
Correct.
I think,
a lot of them, not everyone, because there's all sorts of people who are interested in this because he's figured out the blueprint for how civilization works in some sense. But what the woke are the people who looked at his blueprints, and then they said, well, how do we re-engineer the world we live in toward a moral end? And that moral end is making everyone equal. Right.
Bingo. That's exactly what it is. What the woke are doing is taking the Foucaultian analysis of power and saying, look, we can figure out what are all the assumptions that are built into our society. So all of our conceptions of truth, when we say truth is correspondence to reality, we grab a correspondence theory of truth, or our rigorous epistemologies, or our rigorous ideas of reason, logic, and rationality. What the woke are doing, and John Searle actually talks about this in a couple of places, not the least of which is in I'll send it to you, Ben, and you can link it afterwards. He talks about this as a switch in the universities from the domain to be investigated to the moral cause to be advanced. And he says there's a switch that goes on.
This is great because this corresponds to Haidt. Haidt is really battling with this because he's trying to explain to people that we traded Truth University for Change University. And he's hitting that point again and again and again. I don't think people understand the level to which he is correct. The university's a church at this point. It's an ought factory, not an is factory.
Yeah. Was it ever actually in this?
That's brilliant. It's an ought factory, not an is factory. Yes.
Which is a church, really. It's an attempt at a church.
When you say the woke, we just described.
It's a cathedral, as the neo-reactionaries would be talking about.
What if it's the case that Foucault became so popular, not through his process, not because he laid out a blueprint of what to do, but because in doing this, in acting in a certain way, and becoming more and more woke and being more and more progressive, it's releasing power, or I'm just saying there's the system of processes of knowledge or deconstruction or all these different, postmodern tricks and turns and Enlightenment stuff. But then there's why people do it. I think people do it because it gives them a sense of power, because it releases energy to be able to deconstruct things. That's why they want to do it, not because it's the right thing to do.
It's powerful. It is. It's the
and it always goes in one direction. It always goes in one direction. It always goes left. It always goes progressive. Always.
Searle, we're going to quote Searle again because that Searle isn't usually correct. If the relation of the Western rationalistic tradition to the traditional ideals of the university is, more or less, obvious, the relation between the attacks on the rationalistic tradition and the proposals for educational reform is much less obvious. It is simply a fact that, in recent history, rejection of the Western rationalistic tradition has gone hand in hand with the proposals for politically motivated changes in the curriculum. So, what is the connection? I think the relationships are complex, and I do not know of any simple way to answer the question. But underlying all of the complexity there is, I believe, this simple structure. Those who want to use the universities, especially the humanities, for leftist political transformation correctly perceive that the Western rationalistic tradition is an obstacle in their path. Mm-hmm. In spite of their variety, most of the challengers to the traditional conception of education correctly perceive that if they are forced to conduct academic life according to a set of rules determined by the constraints of truth, objectivity, clarity, rationality, logic, and brute existence of the real world, their task is made more difficult, perhaps impossible. For example, if you think that the purpose of teaching the history of the past is to achieve social and political transformation of the present, then the traditional canons of historical scholarship, the canons of objectivity, evidence, close attention to the facts, and above all truth, can sometimes seem an unnecessary and oppressive regime that stands in the way of achieving more important social objectives.
And also, if truth is a regulating force within the academy, that's why it's full of simpletons now. Because truth is hard, and then whatever this thing isn't hard, and so you've just got a bunch of like outright simpletons with PhDs at this point. But it's not. It doesn't finish there. Like they started this project in late 80s, perhaps. Like
I would say that there's
before that, because the Long March started before that. So this process has been, because it's not just Foucault, right? He came from a very Marxian tradition, which is it's Gramsci starts this kind of stuff, and so there's all sorts of. It's really hard to do this kind of, what would you call it, this kind of citation model to find out who's responsible for what. Because really the truth of it is that it's a big soup of ideas, and people are picking up all sorts of stuff, and no one's site's going backward.
We go to the hermeneutic tribes, and it seems like classical liberals or the rationalists, maybe those can be used as synonyms, I'm not sure, but they are trying to, they were like this tribe in the academy, and then they're fraught, oh no, the woke are taking over and stuff, but it doesn't seem like they want to have moral authority with rationalism. Yeah. I don't know if they can actually gain that. And then you have the woke or the left moral authorities, and then you have this right moral authority, and the right moral authority seems always to be walking in the lines and going in the same, just kind of picking up after the left. It seems like it's always going, the left are always winning. The left are always winning in all these institutions.
And the problem with the rationalists is that they're in the middle with this cold.
Well, they're trying to be in the middle, but
yeah. All they have is this big cold dead thing of facts, and it's like it's not this Sam Harris kind of landscape of morality or whatever he calls it. It's not juicy enough. There's not enough oughts in there. There's no, and insofar as they confuse their method of getting truth with a moral view of the world, they're falling short. It's like a kind of centrist disability to think that truth has moral valence is kind of crazy. And so they've just been swallowed up by people who want to do things in the world. And so that's where the university is at now. And the only real pushback is people who are solid in their oughts. And so that's coming from a Christian, I guess, paradigm. And plus infrastructure. Infrastructure is really important.
By which you mean the accrediting academies and
you've got ideas that just sit there unless they're forwarded and then repeated and built upon and shared and taught to people. And so there's a lot of Christian infrastructure, especially when I was in the South. I figured that out in America. I've never seen so much Christian infrastructure. And that's still there. And so you've got this Ort factory on the other side that's pushing back. But it's two giant hermeneutic tribes that have their own infrastructure.
The hermeneutic and the fight in the Foucaultian sense is who gets to interpret.
Yeah.
That's the battle. It's an interpretive battle.
Which semantic tree do you want to live in and bring your children up in?
But okay, so here we go. Mark Lila. This is the New York Review of Books, 1988, because we're always here at the Wokal Distance Art Factory. Derrida's star began to fall in France in the 80s. It was rising in the English-speaking world, where questions about his political commitments were raised anew. This must have been awkward for him on several counts. Derrida's thought is extremely French in its themes and rhetoric, and it is difficult to understand outside the long-standing Parisian disputes over the legacies of structuralism and Heideggerianism. In the United States, however, his ideas, which were first introduced into literary criticism, now circulate in the alien environment of academic postmodernism, which is a loosely structured constellation of ephemeral disciplines like cultural studies, feminist studies, gay and lesbian studies, science studies, and post-colonial theory.
Can I cut you? When's this guy writing?
1998. 98.
Okay.
Academic postmodernism is nothing if not syncretic, which makes it difficult to understand or even describe. It borrows notions freely from the translated works of Derrida, Michael Foucault, Gilles Deleuze, Jean-François Lyotard, Jean Baudrillard, and Julia Kristeva. And, as if that were not enough, it also seeks inspiration from Walter Benjamin, Theodor Adorno, and other figures from the German Frankfurt School. Given the impossibility, and now here's
these
the
were all
beautiful-
literary critics. Just
wait, it's about to be. Given the impossibility of imposing any logical order on ideas as dissimilar as these, postmodernism is long on attitude and short on argument. Here it is, the sunnum bonum, the Platonic form of the perfect description. What appears to hold it all together is the conviction that promoting these very different thinkers somehow contributes to a shared emancipatory political end, which remains conveniently ill-defined.
But they defined it. Around that point, they were defining it, right?
They were, well, kind of.
Equity.
Remember, equity,
but the different forms of equity in sexuality, queer theory, equity in between cultures, post-colonialism.
But equity is being defined, is constantly being redefined, right? And new dimensions added. It never stays still.
Yeah.
Part of
equity is emancipation. Equity is emancipation.
Yes, yeah. For whoever is trapped within the knowledge of the past. But the problem is that all of a sudden, because truth is functional, truth is a tool, and language is a tool. And so all of a sudden we've got these dickheads in between us who have a moral enterprise. I'm trying to tell you something. I'm trying to switch on things in your brain that are in my brain so we can have a kind of moment of commune, right? And we can work together towards things. So there's all these, there's this practical functionality to what lies between you and me and our shared conceptions of things. Now we have these discourse engineers between you and me, or me and less you and me because we kind of roll in the same hermeneutic tribe, but like me and someone in the street, or certainly me and the arts establishment in Australia, there's all these weirdos between us defining how we speak to each other with an enterprise. It's like communication it's not a means to truth. It's what effect it has in the world. And so it's a very, very, it is crazy how deep this activism goes. This activism is getting between everyone.
Yeah,
attempting to.
I saw a political cartoon which summed this up perfectly. It's two guys, and the first guy says, the climate is collapsing because of climate change. We have to tear down the social and economic system to save the planet. And the guy says, I think we can save the planet, but we don't need to tear down the social and economic system. And someone says, look, I don't want to do that. I want to tear down the social and economic system. Right? Like that's the point.
Finally
right,
honest,
yeah. Everything. So what happens is all of the insights of the left are mixed in with this emancipatory agenda, and the figure of oppression that was originally synthesized through a strange mixture of Freud and Marx, where oppression is no longer a material thing, it's this immaterial thing, where it's the oppression of self. It's a cultural. The Rebel Cell describes this absolutely beautifully, by the way. But this
Norms,
influential mixture of Marx and Freud comes up with this new theory of oppression, which is always relating to the systemic power in society and not the material circumstances in which one actually lives, which is how Beyonce can still be oppressed.
It is funny when you say it like that. It's like how would you describe it? It's engineering the superego, weaponizing weaponizing is not the word. It is engineering the superego, so people will behave in a certain way, and it's not consulting them. It's trying to do it, and then. Yeah.
That's the
Can you hold that thought? Can you hold that thought? I've got to. It's getting kind of cold. I'm just going to grab a jacket.
All right, let me tell a quick little story. Wokal's looking something up. So I met this lovely young woman from Australia who had been a lobbyist in Australia to forward moral agendas within the government. And she had a little business going on there, just being a lobbyist. For one reason or another, she decides to move to LA and do the same thing with Hollywood, where she now goes and campaigns to various different movie studios to forward a moral agenda. And I don't know exactly what any given moral agenda would be, but I know it's pretty liberal. We want to do more equity in this direction, equity in that direction, and stuff like that. So it's always on board. And it was just amazing to me that this woman is doing really well for herself, going around and telling other people what to do, right? Yeah. Specifically government, people who write policy, which is one thing, but then artists too. So the artists in Hollywood are no longer artists at all. They're basically court scribes. They are basically in the same position that a Catholic artist would have been in the Middle Ages. And the only people who are going to be remembered of that cohort were people who excelled or who broke the aesthetics, that they were trapped in an ethic, but then they broke the aesthetics or they innovated aesthetically. So I'm still waiting to see if the moral framework that's progressive or woke will give rise to people who are trapped in it, who actually can do good work. I don't know if equity works on a narrative level without always just parroting the same moral structure.
The story sucks, but it's really interesting watching the ideology wrestle with the talent. And so it kind of breaks my heart when you've got this acting talent and they're selling just absolute dog shit, just the same story you're saying again and again and again and again and again. And sometimes it's really, it's like, I don't know, I watch things from this perspective now. Is like, also because I know how it works behind the scenes. It's like, well, how did they get that through? How did they get that through? Oh, and then you look up the IMDb of the director, and you're like, oh, he's one of the, he's one of, he's allowed to say that because he's gay, or he's allowed to do that, so he's got a little bit more room to move. Because all those conversations that happen behind the scenes, he's got a little bit of room to move within this ideology.
But you notice when somebody's betraying or violating the script.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, that wasn't kosher.
That was really interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Sometimes actors are trying to work around the words that they're using. And they'll make a decision that points in a different direction. And so it's very interesting to see a very, very skilled actor trying to turn down the volume knob on the woke. You know what I mean? It's like,
there's a very
I've been given this. Yeah.
lucrative YouTube critic business where you just basically shit on culture, right? Because Hollywood's just creating all this crap, creating crap. And then you go and you're like, oh, look at the Lord of the Rings and it's so woke, or this is so woke, or that's so woke. It's very popular. People love to hate on the people who are hating their cultural artifacts, Marvel, Disney, whatever. Yeah. But what you're pointing to is actually more interesting, a more interesting sort of critique. It's like, okay, well, we know what the moral framework is. We know what orthodoxy is.
Right?
Yeah.
We know how to,
Look at how that didn't work. Looking at the cracks of freedom, per se. Yeah. And how those things.
Or just the constraint that they're working in. Because I was talking to my girlfriend about this the other night as well. She can see that there's, how do you explain it? It's a lot of actors from minority groups are all of a sudden putting too much passion in it. They're like, it's like all the ideology is bending them. Like there's no truth in the way that they're delivering it because it's too heightened, because they have to give this, oh, I'm sad. It's like every time you pitch something to these woke people, it's like, oh, I like that, but can you put 40 minutes on how it makes black people sad? And it's like, oh, now I've got to make 40 minutes on why this makes black people sad. And then you've got all these actors who are in there whose actual skills are being warped by this. Because they think the world wants to see something. The world wants to see truth. They don't want to see your rendition of 12 Years a Slave when you're buying a coffee or something like that. You know what I mean? Like and I feel really sorry for them because it's a really difficult skill to work into. And then you're getting all these opportunities and people are poking and prodding you in the wrong direction. And it's actually it's really sad when you're like, oh, there's talent there, but this guy doesn't even know it's true anymore. He's never going to be good, no matter how hard he tries, because he's moving off into some fantasy world.
Well, one wonders if there's a hermeneutic tribe that actually can be creative in the culture war, if there's room for anything other than twerking in the culture war, if there's room for anything other than tearing down a beautiful structure in the culture war at this point.
I don't know.
I'm still looking for something. But what you're saying is correct, because the creative impulse is tied to belief and to awe and to a sense of the sublime. And if you don't really believe in anything, all you can do, you can't really create something and pull it out of your being. So all that you're able to do is rehash, which is why we get franchise after franchise after franchise after franchise. And we're just processing and processing and processing and processing and endlessly processing the same superhero story that runs along the exact same lines synthetically over and over and over again. I saw a beautiful meme of someone says, it was like, how a woman writes a lawyer, and it was a picture of Julia Roberts playing Erin Brockovich. And then it says, it says how a woke woman writes a lawyer, and then it's a picture of She-Hulk twerking with just another woman, right? And it's like a real woman who is really doing amazing things looks like Erin Brockovich. The woke hermeneutic synthesized strawberry slurpee version of a female lawyer is twerking with She-Hulk.
But see, the more I'm looking at this, the more that woke is only a small section of it. So with the franchise thing, do you think that you might be interested in this work? I had this thought the other day. The postmodern condition, not with the aughts, with the descriptive enterprise that they're about and that we're kind of living in now, right? We're living in postmodern times.
Yes.
That is a pretty standard state that one would get into with the accumulation of knowledge, which is why it happened earlier in the university, and then B, more culturally, the accumulation of information and the accumulation of stories. Too many stories will put you in that postmodern condition where none of them mean anything. Too much information.
Too much stimulus.
Stimulus, but also information. You've got conflicting. Someone asserts something, you always find a fact to conflict it, and they're two conflicting facts. So your natural state that you go into is like, holy shit, nothing means anything. And
like
so,
all those arguments over COVID vaccines, everybody had 20 papers. Everybody on all sides had 20 papers to point to, and nobody could go through the whole thing.
Because there is something, the irreducible nature of reality will always take you there. And so I think that the postmodern condition is that we're not sharing a home of meaning, which is why we kind of revert to these tribes. So the next step is like a Netflix for each of these tribes, and then they'll all be living in their hermeneutic sanctuaries, and there'll be a lot more meaning there. They'll go to war, but it'll be nicer when it's not battling for hegemony. Maybe it's hegemonies. Maybe everyone has their own.
Since we're talking about shared meanings, I'm going to read a few things to you guys. Again with the reading. Wokal, what are you doing?
Go on. What do you got, Wokal?
Tomorrow is not going to look like yesterday. In fact, tomorrow, to the extent that research can yield clues about it, is being shaped by a cultural transformation that is transforming the rules of American life and moving us into uncharted territory. In examining this revolution, we need to be clear what we mean by the word culture. The view anthropologist Clifford Geertz provides a focus. Geertz emphasizes shared meanings as the essence of culture. The common understandings that we hold about varied particulars of social life and individual behavior. What does it mean in our culture, for example, to work hard, be successful, be a housewife, to fail, to be a homosexual, to have money, to attend Princeton, etc., etc. When you know a society's shared understanding of such a phenomena, you see to the character of its culture. Sociologist Daniel Bell gives the concept a philosophical dimension. Culture for me is the effort to provide a coherent set of answers to the existentialist situations that confront all human beings in the passage of their lives.
Coherent.
Bell further observes a point essential to the argument here, that our own culture has a dynamic thrust of its own, following different axial principles from which regulates the economy or politics. We cannot deduce what is happening in the culture from the events taking place in the political and economic arena. A genuine cultural revolution, then, is one that makes a decisive break with the shared meanings of the past, particularly those that relate to the deepest questions and the purpose and the nature of human life. Such a cultural evolution can coexist with either political conservatism or liberalism. Indeed, today, on many political matters, the social values of libertarians on the right, get the government off our backs, converge with the social values of liberals who insist upon expanding their choice of lifestyles. But wait, there's more.
There's a lot in there, man. We probably don't even need more.
Increasingly in recent years, our studies of the public show that the giant plates of the American culture are shifting beneath us. In our demand for greater fulfillment in a time of economic turbulence, we have set in motion forces that can lead either to a higher stage of civilization or to disaster. Will we achieve a synthesis between traditional commitments and new forms of fulfillment? Or will we end up at the worst of two worlds, a society fragmented and anomic, the family in shambles, the work ethic collapsed, the economy unproductive, our morality flabby and self-centered, and our personal freedom even more restricted than under the old order? If so, we will enter a period of polarizing society which will tear us apart, wreck our society, and crush our spirits. And the last paragraph, the second last paragraph of the piece, is an absolute barn burner. Eventually, we will have to face the fact of rot in our institutions and infrastructure, the inability of our schools to teach, slovenliness and standards of efficiency and precision, the decay of our infrastructure, railroads, bridges, harbors, and roads, the aging of our industrial plants, the litigiousness of an overlawyered society, the decline of our political parties, the bland arrogance of news media, the living in the past of labor unions, the irrelevance of our colleges, the short-term myopia of our industrial leaders, and the seeming inability of government to do anything well. Those and other symptoms of a troubled society nag at us like a neurotic boss who is aware of his or her own power and prerogatives, but has forgotten how to do the job. That is from A Search for Fulfillment in a World Turned Upside Down, a preview of the new important book by Daniel Young Kelevich, Psychology Today, April of 1981.
81. All right. Well, you can see it was underway.
40 years.
Right? It's right there.
Yeah. Well,
It's right there.
The interesting thing that
all
keeps
been there. It's been coming for years.
Yeah.
And they did not understand when the conservatives were saying no. And I participated in the search for self-fulfillment and chasing pleasure in my 20s and chasing self-fulfillment and all of that. And what he said about there's a real danger here of what this is going to lead to. I mean, it is stunning to me that people have missed this, that we went down this path and now we're surprised where we end. But people were screaming about this a long time ago.
So
like this is
but,
old.
but how do you turn something that big? You can't turn something that big.
That's why I like his.
That's the strange thing about a lot of these pundits is the feeling that they get that they're steering history, and it's very few people that actually steer history.
No. Well, Foucault is one of them. But this right here is worth the price of admission. Our demand for greater fulfillment in a time of turbulence, we have set in motion forces that can lead to either a higher stage of civilization or disaster. Will we achieve a synthesis between traditional commitments and new forms of fulfillment? Or will we end up with the worst of two worlds? A society fragmented and anomic, the family in shambles, the work ethic class, the economy uncompetitive, our morality flabby and self-centered, our personal freedom even more restricted than under the old order. If so, we will enter a period of bitter, polarizing social conflict that will tear us apart, wreck our society, and crush our spirits.
Well, how is everyone
What's happened? What happened? He predicted it. He said, look, there's two options. We could end up like this. That's how we ended up. We've seen it. We know what happens. We know what happens when we know what the cynical view of everything as being power and the dissolution of that old order, we see what it does. We have our answer. We know.
Yeah, but we can't look away. We can't ignore power. We can't just bitch about power. I mean, that's why I'm kind of personally attracted or have been investigating the dissident right, the Yarvinites, the Machiavellians, right? Saying, okay, if power is a constant, and human beings are apes, not angels. And we're always going to have schemers, and society's always going to be on a path towards degradation and progress at the same time. So if we try to honestly look at how the system functions, how society functions, and then see kind of approach what's the better way, and then see how can you make something attractive so that people will voluntarily go in the direction of anti-entropy. That would be the interesting work.
The thing that the society needs to do, as I wrote about this, I'm going to put this on my Substack, I think today. I talked about how the meaninglessness of society, and I used a cartoon as my example, but And you'll be able to read it on my Substack later today or maybe tomorrow morning. The thing that has happened is that in the name of trying to get rid of all oppression, they've gotten rid of all the standards. Because if you have social standards for what is true, beautiful, good, valuable, and you have standards of objective value for things, then you're naturally going to put some things are going to be more valuable than other things, and certain ways of living are going to be seen as more valuable than others, and then certain social expressions will be privileged, and then so the person who's married with kids is going to have social cachet, clout, and prestige, which will enable them to have opportunity and resources that the polyamorous person won't have, because we're going to reward them. So their solution is to tear down all of those things. But once you do that, you flatten the world. So the first thing that we need to do is somehow get our institutions of cultural production connected to reality again. Because I hear the dissident right, and the reason that I don't like the NRXers, I shouldn't say I don't like them personally. The reason, and you saw this in a little bit with our debate with Aaron, or not our debate, but my conversation with Aaron, is me and Aaron have a very similar analysis of what's going on. The difference, I would say, between where I think where his sources, because I don't want to speak on him personally because he didn't say this. So, but that the NRX tribe is that the NRX tribe has kind of accepted the Foucaultian description of reality and has said we need to engage a Foucaultian or a postmodern solution, a right-wing postmodernism. We need to have a right-wing solution. And the problem with that is the left runs aground, and you can see that in the fact that we're having double mastectomies on 12-year-olds, right? That's where the left goes off. Well, unmoored from truth, the political right is going to just crash into a different set of rocks.
Can you explain more how they unmoor from truth? It's something that I'm not familiar with.
Well, because
right.
The political right, once they accept the whole notion of the cathedral, right, they begin to accept the entire notion that what counts as true in society is merely a social object.
Do they? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I got to do more homework on this. I don't really.
Yeah, and they're accepting and adopting very explicitly now critical methods in the goal of doing a critical analysis of the left. The point is what you should do, and this is Michael Segru points this out, that the postmodernists tend to apply their postmodern analysis to everything else, and then in the presence of other postmodernists tend to lay off the criticality just a little bit. I pointed this out in my review of Jesus and John Wayne by Kristen Dumais. I said, boy, wouldn't it be interesting if someone did a Marxist analysis of Kristen's economic interests in writing a book about evangelical theology? Given that we could analyze her in that way. We could look at who is she platforming, who is she podcasting with, what are her political tribe's goals, what is she trying to accomplish? Does she, as a woman, benefit from, say, the adoption of evangelicals of allowing women to preach? Well, maybe she doesn't benefit, but do women as a class benefit? Is there a class-based analysis that we could do of Kristen Dumais? And the point is not to accept that analysis, but the point is to say that if you apply Kristen's or the postmodern cynicism, the Foucaultian analysis, and the critical theoretical analysis to the postmoderns itself, their view crumbles too.
Yeah.
That's what you should do. What you're not supposed to do is say, hey, they have a point about that. The problem is that they have left-wing morality. That's not going to work, because now you're going to come unmoored from truth. The critical methods will unmoor you from truth by virtue of what they are. Because they're going to make you skeptical of all truth claims, and you're going to end up swapping out an analysis of truth as an analysis for power, because that's the way the criticality functions.
The conception of truth needs an update, because we don't actually, it's not clear to me whether we don't live in it's not clear to me we've ever lived in a marketplace of ideas.
You mean like a free, unregulated marketplace?
Yeah. It's distribution, and I guess that's the big part of what the postmoderns brought to the table, was a critique of the actual state of things. And so if liberalism can't undergo some pretty major, what would you call it, updates, it'll get eaten alive because it's insufficient to the time.
That's my whole book project is about exactly this.
Wait, you're gonna
how to update it?
Yeah, my whole book project that I'm working on right now, and I'm so sorry it's not done to my publisher. I'm working as fast as I can, but it's a really hard problem to solve.
It's the problem.
Yeah, but the question is,
you will become the man that changes the world if you crack this problem, because it is the problem, right?
From the framework of liberalism, you cannot derive the morals and ethics of a liberal society.
No.
Liberalism, properly construed, is a problem-solving mechanism.
Yep.
So that we don't go to war. But
we defer to
we
the
shift
truth,
the war,
so no one needs power. So it's like, who do you bend the knee to?
Right. So what we do,
power is reality. Yeah, I get
what we're doing is we're setting up a series of mechanisms and norms, as Searle mentioned in his work, which have as their goal to allow us to adjudicate problems as best we can.
Yeah.
But there's got to be an aesthetic.
So far, I
level
have
to
argued
that.
that the biggest single consequence of the rejection of the Western rationalistic tradition is that it makes possible an abandonment of traditional standards of objectivity, truth, and rationality, and opens the way for an educational agenda, one whose primary purpose is to achieve social and political transformation. Most visibly in the humanities, it is now widely accepted that the race, gender, class, and ethnicity of the students defines his or her identity. On this view, it is no longer one of the purpose of education, as it has previously been, to enable the student to develop an identity as a member of a larger universal human intellectual culture. Rather, the new purpose is to reinforce her pride and self-identification with a particular subgroup. For this reason, representativeness in the culture of in the structure of the curriculum, the assigned readings, and the composition of the faculty becomes crucial. If one abandons the commitment to truth and the intellectual excellence that is at the very core of the Western rationalistic tradition, it seems arbitrary and elitist to think that some books are intellectually superior to others, that some theories are true and others false, and that some cultures have produced more important cultural products than others. On the contrary, it seems natural and inevitable to think that all cultures are created intellectually equal. In literary studies, some of these features are indicated by a change in the vocabulary. One does not hear much about the classics, great works of literature, or even works. Rather, the talk nowadays is about text.
Well,
with its leveling implication that one text is as much text as any other text.
Well, that's where we're at. So the interesting thing here is that the liberal project wasn't perfect, but having those ethics in place, having those principles in place, and aspiring to them, I think that now that we've abandoned that, everything's got much crazier, much worse, even if you fall short, you should aspire to them. This is something that I can't let go, Ben. When I'm looking at these, I don't know how to let that go. Looking at these NRX guys, but I haven't done enough homework. I'm only new to this,
but here's the thing. That essay I just read, 1995.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but isn't Searle stating that the goal of education is to plug these individuals into this universal culture? Isn't that the problem? And he's still on board with that universalism.
No, he's saying a universal academic culture of truth. He's not talking about a universal single language or a single standard of which foods taste good or preferences. What he's talking about is a universal intellectual culture geared towards truth. That
doesn't exist. It doesn't exist anymore. That's right. That's the thing that shits me. Yeah, those principles were when you meet a proper academic, they're trying.
Yes, and
they might fall short. They might fall short, but they're trying. And so this is the thing that is interesting for the NRX guys is they're talking about the map as it is. And so this is why I'm starting to roll my eyes at the centrists, because it's like you're talking about a perfect idea land that doesn't actually exist right now. And I'm with you. Right. I like your ethic, but you're kind of a Buddhist monk getting stabbed by the CCP at this point. I'm not. Yes. You know what I mean? It's like
the liberals are
good on you. You're enlightened, but good luck with that fucking
Steven Pinker's or Dalai Lama.
They're pulling out. They're putting on levels and checking the levels and the degree of slope on the walls of a house that's on fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's what they're doing. Yeah. So, but here's the thing. What you said there is important. What the moves, one of the sneaky moves that the postmoderns make is say, look, they go in and they're saying, we're going to do this. We're doing the critical theory and we have our agenda. Look, nobody's neutral. There's a difference between having a point of view and having an axe to grind. Those are not the same thing.
Yeah.
It is one thing for me to say it is one thing for me to say in epistemic humility, all I have is my limited self and I am not omnipotent. I have a particular perspective and I observe things from a particular point and I have that. On the one hand, that's one thing. It's completely different to say I have a social and moral agenda which I'm trying to use the university in the in the service of laundering through. So that's the first thing. And that's a subtle move that they make. Well, nobody's neutral. But the other thing is this. Nobody is flawlessly neutral. That's true.
Yeah.
But the attempt to work as hard as you can to be neutral and then let everybody else criticize you for truth while they're all trying to be neutral.
And to get status for that, right? And to get status for that. There were points in time where this was correct, where that took place.
And when you did that, it fences in the biases as much as you can. Once you say, I'm accepting that I can't be neutral, you don't and say, well, I'm gonna, I just accept that I'm biased. I'm going to accept my biases. That doesn't account for your biases. It lets them out of the cage, right? It's like, I know that the lion exists, but he's in the cage over there. Right? Well, someone says, look, you didn't get rid of the lion. We have the lion. So we'll let it out of the cage. And then it starts to eat you. You say, look, it's much better. I've accounted for the lion. You never got rid of the lion. You have a lion too. Yes. But my lion's in a cage. It's not eating me. And so these people just accept their biases and think that you're doing the same thing. It's like, yes, everyone is biased.
If other people are doing that thing, then it's like a fuck it, I'll do it too. And that's why it gets worse. And we are where we are. And that's right. And the NRXs have accepted this. And they have a better. It's also something that I found interesting about how Rufo goes about his business, because he will talk about having a propagandistic angle or something that will meme out or something, but openly talk about that. And I can't fault someone that does that. Like he gets torn apart for that and shrieks of horror from the centrists and my friend Helen and these things, and I'm like I can't. He's the man in the arena. Chris as long as you're honest, there's something in that, right? No, well, what Chris is doing is saying, and Chris did a video on Foucault where he says Foucault is incredibly cynical, but we're living in his world. Yeah. And so what Chris is doing is the reason, because I know Christopher Rufo very well. All right. Yeah. I speak with Chris almost every day. Really? That's cool. Yeah. And one of the things that Chris is pointing out is to say, what Chris is doing, and I think this is brilliant, is to say, you guys have all fully accepted the Foucaultian Kool-Aid. Because of that, you have certain weaknesses which you cannot account for. And so I can call my shots, tell you what I'm going to do, and your Foucaultian outlook demands a particular response from you, which I'm going to then use against you, and you can't stop because it's your view. Functional. You have to do this. Yeah, it's functional. It's like saying to a Christian... But he hasn't stopped Drag Queen Story Hour, right? Libs of TikTok will have infinite content. The content is not going to stop. Of this. Moral degeneracy is not going to go away. It's center stage. Look who's running Biden's energy, Biden's health. Yes. That is the social inertia that's just keep going. See, you can't stop it. It's like it's like a massive train that gets jumped off the track. It doesn't. It just keeps going. It probably still slides for 2 miles, right? So that's what we're in. 2 decades. It's kind of like if you take an ice cube out of the fridge. Take an ice cube out of the fridge and you let it start melting and let it start melting and let it start melting. When you put it back in the freezer, it still keeps melting. There's a certain amount of melting that's baked into it. So there's a certain amount of social and institutional inertia that's already baked into this. What Rufo has successfully done is jumped the train off the tracks. And what he's did, Rufo has not accepted. But hold on, there's one point I want to make. These things are bigger than our in-groups and bigger than Twitter. And so, I struggle to gauge the scale of the impact of a lot of this stuff because it's hard to figure it out. Right. Like there is a tendency when you're in this world, right, when to make things seem bigger
Well,
than
one of the things
than they are on
is
the
that-
ground. There's all sorts of people who just aren't plugged in whatsoever to any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I guess the intelligentsia who are plugged into this thing end up having an outsized effect on the world. So there was a ripple effects influencing that is really big. But yeah, it's hard to find the scale, right? But go on. What were we going to say?
But I want to launch a defense here of Rufo for just a second. People like there's like this panic about him from a lot of quarters because they're just like especially a conservative sense is like, oh, it's using government. That's using government force. You're forcing your view on it. And it's like, I'm sorry, but what law of the universe is there that we must allow left-wing political activists to embed themselves in and hijack the federal and state bureaucracies? I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was a thing. I didn't realize that was required of me. I'm sorry. I didn't believe. Hold on a second. At what point did it become required of me that I must acquiesce to and agree with a set of laws that allows children to go through gender surgeries? I mean, they can't buy Tylenol. Well, hold on.
Goal to staff the state, not to deconstruct the state, but just staff the state with conservatives and use the authority and the power of the state in his direction. Is that basically?
He said very publicly that what's happened is that the cultural left has united with the political left, and they are trying to give the cultural left is now seeking to give its cultural ideology, worldview, and everything else bureaucratic, administrative, and political power. It wants to consolidate all of the realms of power under its purview. And what Chris is doing, and what a lot of us are doing, is saying, look, it's perfectly legitimate for us to stand up and say no. Mm. That's perfectly legitimate.
But you're not just doing that. You want to embed power in the other direction.
No.
Say with the gender thing, to deny children these surgeries for this gender.
Yeah.
That's using the state to affect your will on other people.
We are going to say no. Just like
it's not just saying no. It's not just saying don't do that. It's saying you can't do that.
Correct.
Right. I just want to put the edge on that.
Right. In the same way that no, you cannot beat that 5-year-old with a baseball bat. No, you're not allowed. Like the political right has taken to libertinism, an amoral libertinism, whereas as long as you're not harming anyone else, you can't do that. As long as you're not directly and immediately harming somebody without their consent. But as long as everyone consents, it's okay. And it's like, can 14-year-olds consent to having their genitals removed? Because if they can consent to that, what else might they be able to consent to? We would want to say no. Like if a 14-year-old consented to get shot, we wouldn't say, oh, well, he agreed to it.
I just don't see how this is different than what the NRX are doing. They're just, you guys are saying the power is power, and we are going to command the centers of power. Well,
there's a difference so they have made they have some strategic moves which are similar to what we would say. But the difference is, and Chris talked about this in his video on Foucault, he said we have to reject Foucault's cynicism and nihilism, his relativism of truth, his acceptance of what's true is just what the cultural productions say it is. Chris and I would like to hook up our cultural production centers at our universities. We want to plug those back into the reality. We want truth to be the thing that tethers those two things together.
What's true or not true about gender ideology, though? I mean, you guys are going to make some moral claims at some point that aren't true, that are moral, that are oughts, that are not ises. I just think you have a competing set of oughts.
Oh,
those are all culturally constructed. Those are all texts.
I'm a moral objectivist. I don't believe morals and social values are culturally and socially constructed entirely. I believe they have an ontological element to them. They're real. I'm a moral realist. I believe there are some things that are true or false regardless of whether society says they are or not. There are some absolute truths and objective moral truths.
Some actions, some thoughts, some ways of thinking, some attitudes.
Yes, there are things. There's objective truth in the moral realm. It is objectively wrong to commit murder. That's objective. That's not a culturally constructed thing.
Well, is it objectively wrong to be into BDSM with a consenting adult?
There would be a moral fact of the matter. I'm not going to litigate a particularly hard thing right now, because then you're going to conflate moral ontology with moral epistemology, and that's a mistake I don't want to make at the moment. And we quite frankly don't have time to go through that. But there are objective moral values and objective moral truths. And what I'm saying is that the liberal system allows us to have that debate. The mistake that's been made is to say that the liberal system sides with the liberal
progress.
System
with
sides always with the most open element and does not allow anyone to say no. I don't agree. I think there is room for us to make moral claims, because if you couldn't make any moral claims, you couldn't ban things like rape and murder and bank robberies and theft. Like, you couldn't ban anything if you couldn't.
And then the tyrants who are making moral claims will just take over.
So you would have to, instead of participating in repressive tolerance, you would be fostering intolerance. You would be fostering moral guidance that would cause in the viewer or the children who are subjected to the education under your government to reflexively recoil to what you would say is evil.
This is where school choice comes in. It's like there are mechanisms that aren't forcing. This is why I can't really figure out where the force comes from. There are some moves that are being made there that are a little bit but they're.
School choice. You bring up school choice so that you can have Christians living side by side with LGBT schools, and then those two populations somehow get along when they go to Starbucks.
Well, the hope is that one of them will look at the school board at some point, and one of those schools will be horrific, and then people will stop going there.
But if Starbucks has the pride flag in every one of its stores, then it captures the market from one and then denies. And then you'd have to have a Christian Starbucks that flies the Christian flag. I don't see how that doesn't result in either competing or overlaying cultures.
My view is
competing. I think the goal is to compete then, isn't it? To compete for students based on their outcomes. I'm just saying this seems like one piece of activism within that big activist paradigm, and I'm looking at that going, all right, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to do it without force doing what the other side are doing. You know?
Okay. Yeah.
The point is, of course, that we can't change the culture, and it's not going to change overnight. What we can do is prevent and stop them through mechanisms like school choice. We can prevent them from taking over, colonizing, and weaponizing the organs of American government. We can put up a resistance there and say, stop. That's what we want to do. We can break the connection between the cultural left and the bureaucratic power. We can start there. Now, the other side of it the point you're talking about dealing with the culture is this. You're saying, yeah, but that's not going to stop. Okay, so you manage to not have a woke military. That doesn't stop Starbucks from having its triangle flag. That doesn't stop Lizzo from twerking with a flute. That doesn't stop any of the stuff that's currently going on. So you pass a law that says kids can't get gender surgery, so they schedule it for their 18th birthday, and everything happens exactly as it ever did, right? That's the thing. My point is that politics and culture are now enmeshed utterly, because they're both discourses. There used to be, yes, but there used to be some sense of a dividing line. We used to have like Neapolitan ice cream where you had the strawberry and the chocolate and the vanilla, and they're all mixed together, but you can kind of see the difference. Now it's all just blended like a milkshake into a blur. Yeah. The paradigm case of this is AOC. AOC is a cultural celebrity because of her politics. It used to be
I'm fading a bit, guys. I'm not going to be able to contribute very well from this point. But we can finish this point, but I just need to go soon.
I'll just finish this and maybe we can just hop into something else which you had mentioned before. And because of that, what we can do is because politics and culture are more now enmeshed than they've ever been. I mean, that's always kind of been enmeshed, but now they're thoroughly, is that you can use the political spot as your starting point to say no, to build your cultural movement. The political resistance, the resistance to the encroachment of the woke on the administrative organs can be leveraged to say that that's bad, and it gives a place to create resistance. So, for example, when Russ Vought, who was Trump's OMB director, says we're going to ban critical race theory, we're going to say no to critical race theory in government, and they pass that order down. When that happens, that creates a political debate. That political debate quickly turns into a cultural debate, which happens on places like The View and on Bill Maher. And all of a sudden, the cultural conversation, which was not happening about those ideas, can begin to happen. And that creates a space for cultural resistance. Now, because Mike is fading, and I don't want him to die, I just want to touch on something that you and I talked about a long time ago. And this is like a little bit low level, so you don't need to do about this argument. We went over this. There's a phenomenon that happened maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, where last time I was on your show, and Mike sent me a DM, and he said, you hedged on nearly everything you said about what people respond back to you on Twitter. And it was true. And so there's this phenomenon, which I wasn't even aware of, but I'm more aware of now, and which I thank Mike for like saving my mental life with this, is that there's this thing that can happen when you, because back to your point now, when you talked about agency and agency of various prophets, where you say something and you're inundated with so much feedback, and a lot of it is deconstructive, and it's an attempt to attack the meaning. So pushing what you said and finding edge cases or different ways to misinterpret you, which might seem plausible. And there are certain people who are dedicated to this. So they will, every time you tweet, they're hitting you 2 or 3 times with the misinterpretations. And all of a sudden what happens is, abstracted out of that, you get, what did you call it, Mike? The
pedant's gaze.
Yes, the pedant's gaze, where you begin to look at everything you think and say in the most pedantic, bad way possible as you're thinking it. And it just munches away on your soul.
Yeah, yeah. It makes you still. You hedge everything you say. I've just seen it before. I've seen a lot of people go into this state of mind where they're hedging the things they say. They can no longer assert clauses all over the place, so their tweets you can't even read. It's just that it's knowing that everything you say is going to be deconstructed and misconstrued, and then internalizing that. And it's a lot of people are going mad with this.
Yeah,
and so
or not saying anything or retreating.
Are you committed to not doing that? Is that why you bring it up?
No, I bring that up to say
talk.
That when we had that conversation, I realized and there were some people I just blocked. They weren't even that they were uncivil. It was just, you're committed to missing the point in things I say and doing it over, and then trying to drag me into these conversations where you nitpick every little thing I say. And then as soon as I ask you what you think, you make bold, sweeping claims. So everything I say gets nitpicked to pieces, and you just make bold, sweeping claims using as intuitive a language as you come up with. And then I try to ask you a question about that. You make more bold, sweeping claims in as intuitive and a persuasive language as you can. And I realize very quickly that your goal is to nitpick the meaning of what I say and radiate as much of your hermeneutic of the world as you can. And when that situation happens,
it's playing to win, not to find that there's no truth. Truth doesn't matter. It's just winning. It's just getting you down. Yeah. And
when that happens, you end up nitpicking your own soul into shreds. And so what you were saying about the prophets is, the biggest thing that I see for the prophets is not just that they get led by their audience, or figuring out whether they've got the fire in their bones, but can they continue on with their prophetic vision without nitpicking it to death in the name of not being deconstructed or trying to preempt the inevitable deconstruction of whatever
therein lies the escape velocity. You have to escape the people trying to drag you in all sorts of directions and judge you. But how do you also do that and not go mad is another question, because you need to regulate. Yeah, it's true. But there is benefit in regulating what you say and your thoughts against something. But it's a balance. It's a balance.
Is there something that you guys would like to plug? Mike, I know you have some awesome things coming down that you don't want to speak about, but is there any way that people can get more of you?
YouTube and Twitter. That's where I'm at.
All right.
But there'll be more. I've got some stuff. You
got some big things
soon. Some big things. Yeah. Just tangling with some business elements.
Yeah. Talk about stuff. Breaking you down, those fucking business people. And Wokal, you got Wokal Distance, Substack.com, Wokal Distance on Twitter. And you have one video on your YouTube channel.
I have a single video. I'm working on the creation of a teaching series where I'm going to teach wokeness and postmodernism and try and get through it. And that's what I'm aiming towards. I'd like to be able to do that, and then put those videos up on my Substack so people can get it in a well-collected, well-thought lecture that's a little less freewheeling than this. Just before we run, just to put a little bow on something, I think everyone who wants to govern is going to exercise power and set limits on what's appropriate and what's not. But those limits of what's appropriate and that moral value can't be derived from the structure of liberalism itself. And so what the NRX guys are saying is we want to be able to exercise power in service of a certain set of morals that we have. And I agree, we should be able to exercise some power in a certain set of morals. I would like to be able to make sure that rape continues to be illegal, for example. But I also think that in the process of doing that, if we get so focused on power that we forget truth, or that we ignore the connection between truth and reality and our morals and reality and our culture and reality, that's a problem. And that's why when Chris made that video, he stressed so heavily that we're not following Foucault down the hole of relativism where truth just is a product of blah, 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 blah. We're going to keep it so that it's nailed down to the world.
Where can I see this? I'm interested in it.
It's Chris put it on his YouTube video.
He's got a YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
He's got a YouTube channel now, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Okay,
he calls
we'll
it.
Link that.
He calls his videos Christopher Rufo theory, CRT. and he says, but we are living in Foucault's world, so we need to understand a little bit of how those rules are played. But while recognizing it, we want to be resisting and pushing against it. And I think that there's too many of the NRX guys who've just accepted critical methods in their entirety. And they've said this. Some of them have said this. So just want to touch on that. Ben, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Like and subscribe to this channel. And we're going to do a fundraiser to get Wokal. Sorry, speaking to the wrong camera. We're going to do a fundraiser to get Wokal a fidget toy that doesn't make a snapping sound. Maybe like some sort of rubber ducky or something without a whistle or something. Because he's got
Sorry.
A chew toy.
Thank you guys. Thank you both.
All right, mate. Thank you. See you, lads.
Okay.